Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Gilmore with Noisy Bird Digital Marketing, and you are watching another episode of Wingin It. If this is your first time here, every week I talk with a different business owner. We talk about how to help you feel like you're winging it in your business just a little bit less. I am so excited, guys. We have Jeremy Kelsch. He's the owner of Peppermint Cabinets down in St. George, Utah. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here, man. Really excited about our conversation today. How you doing?
Doing well, Tommy. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So go ahead and yeah, let's just jump in, man. Tell people a little bit about Peppermint Cabinets and your background, how you got started in the cabinet business and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I started in cabinets when I was 16. My grandfather actually had a shop in northern Utah, and I tried to get out of it so many different times, dude. I was an insurance agent. I went into mortgages for a short time, and ultimately just kept coming back to cabinets. It's what I knew. And so I think I realized somewhere in my early 30s that I was just going to submit to cabinets because it's what I knew, and I knew I had some ability and some skill. So yeah, we decided to go out on our own and leave the family business and start my own. So we moved from up northern Utah to St. George in 2019, and we sold our first job in April. It was April 26, 2019, and kind of the rest is history.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, you're burying the lead a little bit. The rest is history. You guys, you told me before you have 28 W-2 employees. You guys are on track to do $7 million a year. I mean, this is it's kind of the American dream story, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I took a chance. I shoved off on my own, and it hasn't been sunshine and rainbows, but you're doing the thing, man. You've built a real business. You're employing people, and you're doing a good service, which is the most important thing. So
yeah, for sure.
I think that's awesome. And I'm excited to hear a little bit about, we've talked in some other podcasts about the dash, on your gravestone, you're born, you're dead, but there's nothing in about that dash, right? So today we're going to dive into the dash and learn, how do you go from, I know how to build some cool cabinets, but I've got nobody to sell them to. And now here you are this year employing 28 people and doing some good work. And I know that one of the big things that we want to talk about today is the financial side of that, because, for people that may not know, cabinets is not a high margin industry, right? So to speak to that a little bit and kind of set some context for why is it so difficult to manage the finances of a cabinet?
Yeah. So with a cabinet company, at least manufacturing your own, you have your standard costs, which are all of your cost of goods. And it's funny, I see all the time, cabinets are so expensive. And it's like, well, we're not living we don't have these high margins like a service industry, garage doors, plumbing, HVAC. Those are high margin service industries. We are a service industry, but when you're manufacturing, you have all of the cost of goods, all the hidden costs, return trips, all your labor, any overtime. It can get out of hand just extremely fast, down to if somebody's ordering 2 or 3 extra sheets on a job and they make that kind of standard, then you're losing so much of your margin. Everything cuts into your margin. So when you're producing at a high level, you really got to be watching every piece. And it took me hiring a CFO to realize that. Like I'm going to wing it, right? They call me a bull in a china shop because I'm aggressive. I'm like, well, if somebody can do it, I can do it. And that served me well. But from an organization standpoint, or dotting all the I's and crossing the T's in the business aspect, there was definitely some of that left hanging. So hiring a CFO really shifted how I looked at all of that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I love what you said about we as entrepreneurs, we have that, like, I can wear all the hats, right? And that's why we get started. It's that maybe it's boldness, maybe it's stupidity, maybe it's a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Yeah.
Because we don't know how to do it. That's okay. We'll just figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And that serves us up until it doesn't serve us. So, what made you go the route of hiring that CFO? And, was there some grave mistake that you had to learn from, or was it just, I just don't have time for this anymore? Like how did you realize it was time to make that jump for your business?
Yeah. So, after about 5 years of continually beating my head against the wall, anybody looking in, I was doing well. I think in 2023, I think we did 3.7 million in sales or in revenue, but it was just continually, it felt like it was robbing Peter to pay Paul. It was just all over. And when you're manufacturing, you might get a deposit on a job, but you're not going to make up the rest of that for sometimes 3 to 4 months because you've got to produce them. Then you've got to, get them installed. Then the customer has to close on his house and then you get paid, so that can drag out a long time. So for me coming into, I didn't have a background in any financials. I just I call myself a redneck, I'm just going to like wing it. And it just was always like a push and pull, feast or famine financially. And it got to a point where I was so tired. I was, there were multiple times repeating the same thing, the same patterns, like, well, payroll, I guess I got to go pull out of my savings to make payroll this time, or, just stuff like that. And you're looking back and saying, well, 3.7 million, how does that happen? Like, how am I still having to rob my savings or not get paid to make this thing run, And so after I kind of hit a point where I was just really burned out, and I knew I have a relationship with an ex-business coach. I guess I hired her company to come in and coach for a while. And I knew how intelligent she was. She's extremely, extremely intelligent. And my first sit down with her was actually, hey, do you want to be the CEO? Because I clearly am missing some. And so it was about a 3 or 4 hour conversation. And at the end, she said, Jeremy, I don't think you need a CEO. I think you need a CFO. She said, you need the numbers to know that when you have a vision or something that we're trying to pull the trigger, that the numbers back it up. You need to know that all of your payroll's covered, all of your deposits, all the jobs are covered, like all of the data that, I'm looking at my literally my accounts payable or I guess all the open invoices, right? And I would go through and I'm like, okay, so these ones we've ordered material, these ones have installed, these ones we haven't done anything on. So I would do that math every month to determine where our financial runway was essentially. And she's like, no, we've got to do better. So I actually brought her on as my CFO and completely changed the game.
Yeah.
And after I brought her on, I actually talked to one of my mentors. I call her a mentor. I probably talk to her two times a year maybe, but she's extremely successful. And she said, any company that's doing over $1 million in revenue should have a CFO, even if it's fractional. And I was like, well, that's good that I hired her. I'm 3 or 4 times that. So that's a good step.
Yeah. And I think that everybody's kind of felt that, right? That robbing Peter to save Paul or to pay Paul and just like the feeling of spinning your wheels. And I'm sure that you've done this, but I think every business owner thinks, oh, I'll just sell my way out of this.
Yeah.
Like the answer is to do more of this somehow, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Because if I sell a little bit more, then we'll just make profit appear out of thin air.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're going to go, it's kind of like compound interest, right? So it's like once we hit this, then we start doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there is a point. There's a point that it is true, right? Like,
right.
So sometimes, yes, the answer is you do need to sell more, and every business would like more sales, of course, but more sales doesn't always mean you're more profitable. So I guess, talk about that in the last 2 years since you hired on this CFO. What steps did you guys have to take within your business to say, hey, we can't just sell our way out of this. We do need more sales. And you guys have doubled your sales since then, it sounds like. So congratulations. But like doubling your sales doesn't double your revenue. It just doubles the amount of stuff you have to do. So what have you done since then to make it so that you're feeling less burned out, your business can grow, and there's maybe a little bit of wiggle room so you're not just guessing and winging it with your finances?
Yeah. So when she first came on, it was extremely challenging for me because it was basically 6 months of holding up a mirror, right? Like, why did you do this? Why do you do this? And we found things that had hit our bank account that nobody had any idea what they were. Like we had somebody bought an Apple phone. We think one of our old employees had our card and they bought a phone from Apple. And we had no idea. And she found it like 2 months after or 3 months after she started. She's like, what is this? And I don't know. So it was a lot of, pride cometh before the fall. I had to just drop my pride and just go with it. But we were offering bonuses at that time to some of my leads. We had to cut that. We cut my wage got cut. We got very, very granular with what was purchased every month, from shop supplies, cups, coffee, everything got very, very granular. And so we kind of we pretended as if we were just trying to save any dollar that we possibly could. And that's how we operated for a year. And we worked our way out of over $400,000 in vendor debt and still had a massive profit margin at the end of the year. We ended up having to, well, not having, but we bought a new $200,000 piece of equipment. We bought another truck, by the end of 2025.
That's awesome.
So, but it was be very, very granular. And when people tell me, they're like, you got a budget, I'm like, no, that's not the answer. But it really is. But it's more than just budgeting. It's getting so granular, knowing exactly where your money needs to go before it ever comes up. So like right now, I can go out the rest of this year and I know exactly what I need to make to cover everything within probably 5%.
That's awesome.
Because there's some variables, but that's what it took.
Yeah. No, and I think that's one of the key things is like knowing what your overhead is, right? Like for you have employee wages, so you know how much that is. About, okay, this is how much we need for cost of goods. You know gas to a certain extent, because gas prices are nuts, but you can guess about how much you're going to spend in gas, and all your rent for your lease for the building, like all of those things get factored in. And so okay, I take all that in a year, divide it by 12, and like you said, I know within about 5% what that overall bill is going to look like. And so we can't make under whatever this number is.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we were doing anyway. So like I had a break even point every month, but when I brought her in, it was way more things I didn't see, all these variable costs that I actually could control, that, it's hemorrhaging money and you don't see it because it's such like small cuts, death by 1,000 cuts, essentially. Like, we have to do an extra dumpster this month. Oh yeah, no problem. It's just part of business. No. Why do you have to do an extra dumpster this month? What happened to push that over? Hey, we're 10% over on sheet goods this month. Why? Like everything has to start being questioned, down to literally the stuff I wrap my cabinets with, the coffee, half and half. It's like you have a budget and you stay with that. And it's done absolutely amazing things for the company to get that granular.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, I a lot of times we have 40 other things that we're trying to manage. And so your example of that extra dumpster, you're like, okay, yeah, like we
need it.
We feel busy right now. So of course we need an extra dumpster. And then, like you said, but then you have somebody that is asking the question, wait, no, we're doing the same amount. Why do we need the extra dumpster? What happened? And so I love that. I think that that's such a good example of that the death by 1,000 cuts, those little things that are $100 here, $300 there, and as a business, like in my personal life, if $100 just disappeared, I'd know it. But in a business where you're looking at, it feels
hundreds
like fake numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars every month sometimes, or even $1 million. You're writing a proposal for, $500,000 or whatever. $100 just doesn't feel like anything. So you're like, yep, sure, whatever. Like that's $100. I don't care. Go do it. But like you said, those things add up, and then suddenly you have $10,000 of little things that have added up that you weren't expecting. So I think that really is, whether it's in your personal finance or whether it's in your business finance, it is those little things. It's the subscriptions for Netflix. Sometimes you have 2 of them and you don't even know about it, or you're like, oh, we haven't used Netflix in 3 months and I'm still getting charged $18 a month or whatever, $20 a month, whatever it is now. And it, not that it's a huge amount, but that's $60 if you haven't used it in 3 months.
Oh, and we found stuff like that. Like, hey, who's paying for Adobe? Like, who's this account? Like, I don't know.
Who's using Adobe? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, it's $200 a month or $250 a year. I don't know what. There was multiple cases, and it's like, don't know who it's for. And it seems stupid and it's embarrassing to say that, but when you're, hundreds and hundreds of transactions a month, it quickly gets away from you.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and like you said, different employees and different things like that, you're going to have duplications, you're going to have things like that. And so if there's nobody watching over those things,
Yeah.
you're, you're just winging it. You're
Yeah.
just trying to, hey, cool. Yeah. We haven't hit negative this month, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. Yep. That's true.
So, I mean, speak on, you've grown to this almost $7 million mark. You have the margins. I know that COVID, you guys probably went through a lot as far as supply chain issues and cost of goods issues, all of that stuff. What did it take to survive that time as you're a new business? I mean, you're in business a year, suddenly everything shuts down. Construction's still going in some places like Utah. I'm sure that wasn't an issue, but supply chain and stuff like that, what did it take to get through that time for you guys?
Yeah. So COVID actually was interesting. So when I first moved down in 2019, I was just selling other people's cabinets. So I had relationships with, other manufacturers, and I would just try to sell their cabinets down here. COVID hit, and, I went from being able to get a kitchen 4 to 5 weeks to the earliest I could get one was 14. And down here, so in northern Utah, everything has basements. So you have about a 12-week from the time they start. Well, the time you're doing the job to the time they need cabinets. Well, down here, you've got about 4 or 5. So none of my suppliers worked anymore. It was really hard to move anything. And so we started looking at just building our own. And so we would order parts in and we would paint them and assemble them. That's kind of what happened. COVID was kind of a catch-22 because there were a lot of builders that got dropped by other manufacturers. And so they would call me because we had a pretty good name by that time that we could fulfill. And, they'd call me and they're like, hey, I just got dropped. I'm in a hard situation here. And I would just tell them, well, just remember, we're all in this together. We're all struggling. But if you use me, I'll do everything I can to complete your job as fast as I can. Just be patient with me and the supply chain. And we actually got a lot of business from that. And they still work with us to this day because of our willingness to just take them on and do everything we can. I think for 9 months, I was basically, my number one role was procuring material.
Yeah.
I was calling all sorts of random places for certain hardware we needed, or it was just crazy. I went from trying to run a business to just trying to get stuff. So, but it taught us a lot. I think it made us stronger. It made us more creative. And for me, it taught me a lot about what's available and who's out there that can also supply the same thing that I'm currently getting.
Yeah.
So, but it was tough. It was definitely tough. And I don't know, it was weird because the whole market was booming, building, all our sheet goods went up 100 times, but yeah, there was a lot of building. It was weird.
Yeah. Well, and I know that, I mean, you're talking about going and knocking down doors to try to get materials and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to brush over that because I think so often in business, we feel like our backs are against the wall a little bit. And it sounds like that's where you were at. You have potential long-term clients knocking on your door saying, hey, I want you to do this for me. And you're saying, you're doing a great job of setting the expectation, which is so important because in sales, it's so easy to say yes, 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 and over promise. And then you get into
fulfill.
But you as the business owner, you don't want to do that. So you're doing a good job of managing those expectations, but you've also got builders that need what you're doing. You want to build that relationship with them and show that you can show up. So, what did you have to do to find those materials? What was that process like? Were you just going down Google? Were you going through phone books? Like, what did it take to find the materials in that time?
Yeah, it was nuts. I was small at the time. So my main supplier of hardware kind of gave us a very, very small allotment. And they're like, sorry, you're not getting more, which they did that to a lot of people. So for hardware, so hinges, door glides, I was on Google. I was looking for multiple resources as far as anybody that could get me anything that would even operate that I could kind of get behind. I would get on Google. I remember one instance I needed like 3 glides to finish this job, and I'm calling places all over the West Coast. I end up clear up in some smaller shop in Washington, and I'm like, hey, I need 3 glides. Can you send them to me? And it costs me like $80 a glide, which normally it's like $20 to $25. But that's what you did. I had all the Home Depots. I watched their stock because normally you don't buy anything from Home Depot. But all of my sheet goods suppliers it was either limited that I could have or they were out of it. And so I would watch Home Depot and then like, guys, hey, they got 20 of these sheets. Go get them. Hey, put those on hold. Go get them. And I was doing that. That's just what I did all the time. I'd call other suppliers or other manufacturers and say, hey, do you have this? And so we all kind of worked together. I felt like a lot of the cabinet guys kind of tried to help each other out. Hardware was like a no-go. Even for me, I happened to get lucky and get on some of my hardware that I saw it coming. So I put in a big order for it.
Yeah.
Worked out for me. Didn't work out as well for other people, but that stuff that was gold at that point.
Yeah.
If you can't put drawers in cabinets, then you're not able to complete it.
You got a big box of wood.
Yeah. But I know some of the banks were closing houses without the cabinets being finished. And it was a wild time.
Yeah. But I mean, you came out on the other side and I mean, it sounds like, in the long run, it ended up being good because you could build some of those relationships with the builders. It sounds like you became like a preferred vendor almost and were able to do that. And do you attribute that to a lot of the growth that you guys felt in the long run?
Yeah. Yeah. I think our willingness to go above and beyond and get so creative with how we procured materials, I think it really helped us long term. I mean, 2022 was a really big year. We actually went, was it 22? Yeah, it was 22. Really big year. And that was from a lot of the work we got during the COVID era and from a lot of those contractors.
Yeah. So I think that there's an important lesson there, right? I think that so often just as people, we view adversity as like either one, I'm doing something wrong, or two, I'm not meant to do this anymore. Like that's when we quit, is when it gets hard, when we face the adversity. And I don't think everybody would have gone for 9 months of watching Home Depot stock and calling every cabinet shop in the West, doing that extra mile stuff that you had to do for, 9 months is not nothing. That's a long time, especially when you're like, I've only been in business for, 2 years.
Yeah. 18. Yeah.
Yeah. Half my time here has been just chasing down materials. And so it's a big deal to look at that and then to be able to say, yeah, but then, the following year we had our biggest year yet and we, and explosive growth, and we've seen that grow ever since. And it's cool to be able to look at that and say, if somebody that's watching or listening, if you're thinking about quitting your business, you don't know what's on the other side of what you're going through right now. And it really is a lot of times that adversity will shape your business into what it's actually supposed to be.
Yeah. Yep. I couldn't agree more. And I think that a lot of times we get so in our heads when I know I do, or have in the past, where you're going through something so hard, you're just like, is it even worth it? But it's an opportunity for you to look in the mirror. And I think that's where most of your growth happens. Like, why is it happening this way? Does it have to be this hard? Am I being a victim to the circumstance, or am I taking control over it? It really is a mindset, and being a business owner, especially pushing for something, like my goals are stacked, like they're big goals, and it requires that constant reflection. I came into this year and I'm like, all right, the person that got me last year's revenue isn't the same person that's going to get me to this year's goal. So where do I have to improve? It's not your team. It's not anybody but you, because it all stems from you. So I don't know. It's hard when you're in it to look at it that way, but if people can learn to look at it that way, it'll serve them for sure.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that that's something I didn't understand until I got into business. I think it's really easy to look at business owners as greedy because it's like, man, when is enough enough, But like you said, it for me, and I view it very much the same way. It's, not that I'm going to be a better person because I made more money, but I'm going to be a better person because of the skills that I learned, because of the people I can bless, because of the things that my business can do when I'm double the amount of revenue I am today. It requires me to do different things. It requires me to be a different person, to be a different leader, and to focus on those things that help us as a team to get to that place.
For sure.
And so I think it's really easy to discount those, as like, I'm just being greedy. But it's not,
it's
because
not.
if you go into it with that mindset, then it is for sure. If you're just trying to make money to make money, but if you're there and you recognize I'm doing a service, I'm helping people with what I do, and I want to be able to help as many people with it as I can. And so we have to accomplish these things. And so I have to be a new person for that. Right. It just depends on the mindset to get there.
Yeah, so money follows value. In order to, if you want to double your income, then you've got to double your value, whatever that looks like. Whether it's increased production, like there has to be a value tied to it. That's how I see it. So the better you get at your craft, the more you're able to offer or provide as far as value goes. I think that's what you're speaking to. It's not a greed thing. It's 100% like the value, but it also is what value are you creating for your team, your employees? And that was one thing that after I kind of shifted financials over to my CFO, I realized how good of a CEO I actually can be, because it completely shifted my perspective from we got to hit money, we got to get money, we got to get money, to how do I build my team up? How do I build that culture? How do I help them all progress in life and love being here? It completely shifted, and yeah, it's not about the greed or anything. It's about you've created value through what you offer to the marketplace, but also what you offer to your team. And money is just an expression of value. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I wanted to shift a little bit, and it's still in the same vein, because you like you said, your company is focused on providing value. And so a lot of people that watch this podcast are in the building industry. And so a lot of them are going to be general contractors that are looking at maybe their own cabinet subs that they use and wondering, how do I gauge them? How do I find the right cabinet subs? What are some things that you guys focus on that are valuable, and what kinds of questions could a GC ask you to screen you and be able to find somebody that's operating at that same level and doing good quality work and not setting their timelines behind and doing those things that are the GC headaches that they get to do?
Yeah. So obviously I could go on forever about that, but it really depends on their budget. So GCs that are so focused on price, you're generally going to get what you pay for. It's not always bad. And I'm not saying, pay the guy that's 100,000 more than, but what I am saying is, as we're so focused on the numbers that we forget that the time is also a number. And so oftentimes I see it, I had a discussion this week actually with a company that they hired the cheaper option and they're not being able to fulfill. And so they called me in to look at the project and taking it over. In fact, there's two of them this week. So the first thing, really, if you're a GC, ask, how are your vendor accounts? What does your account look like with them? And give me some other contractors you've worked with and call them and see what their work is. I mean, that's going to save you a lot. And there's a time and place for import cabinets or, cheap cabinets. I get it. I'm not blind to that. But if you're trying to do a $2-3 million home and you're trying to sneak by some cheap cabinets, I think it'll ultimately end up biting you. So definitely look at that. And I think a lot of people they think custom cabinets are just unholy expensive. And at the end of the day, if you price both options, they're not. So ask the question, get a bid, get multiple bids. I mean, I've won bids over a Chinese import company because I was cheaper. I was like,
Wow.
Dang it, I hate that. I don't want to be cheaper than them. But time is money, and I think sometimes we forget that and just get multiple bids and definitely ask about financials.
Yeah, I love that. I like the idea of asking them about, hey, who are some other contractors that you're working with? And it's just that social proof, right? And if you can ask and 2 or 3 people are recommending you, that's usually a good sign that you're at least most of the time doing some pretty good work.
Yeah. Well, it's just like an interview, right? From an interview you to hire you, who are your references?
Yeah.
And I have called them, and some of them are like, okay, maybe not.
That's awesome. Well, Jeremy, I want to, respect your time. You got a lot of business that you're doing, but this has been super valuable, man. I appreciate you being open. I appreciate you being honest. And I think that a lot of people listening will have learned a lot from you today. So first of all, thank you for that.
I hope so. Yeah, absolutely.
The last question I like to ask is just about, you've been in business for yourself for 7 years, but you've been in the business world a long time, helping with your family business and doing all that. What would you say has been the best piece of business advice you've ever been given, and how do you implement that into your business?
There's a lot of pieces. I would say don't be everything to everybody. Focus on what you're good at and what you know your margins are, or where you can hit your margins, and stay in the lane, and be willing to say no. That would be, there's any new business or even smaller, that's your number one thing you're going to come up against. Can you do this? Oh yeah, I can do that. You lost your butt. In most cases, you can't do it like somebody that specializes in that can. So I would say stay in your lane and be willing to say no.
I love that. I think that that's some of the best advice you can be given, is learning how to niche down.
Mm-hmm.
What I, I heard it from a mentor when I was just getting off the ground. We just hit our first $10,000 month, and marketing's very different. Our margins are sky high. So it's like, oh, I actually have some money now. This is cool. So I was asking her, like, what do I do? How does this business thing work?
Yeah.
And she said, well, what you want to do now is you want to look at your time, figure out, how am I spending my time? What are the 2 or 3 things that I love doing that move the business forward the most? And then everything else that's not on that list, hire a person for that. Hire them part-time, get them on, and make sure they're stinking good at that. And so, it's good advice not only for business. What do we like to do as a business? What are we good at doing? What's our good margins at? Figuring out those things, but also like you said, time is just as much a commodity. How do I want to spend my time? What things bring me joy and fill me up? Okay, if I, like in my business, I don't love doing social media. That's just not something I enjoy doing. So I'm going to hire somebody that loves sitting on Instagram and loves commenting on other people's stuff and creating that engagement. And like, this would be a fun reel, like having those things. That's what I hired her for. And she's awesome. And she freaking kills it with social media. And so whatever your industry is, find those things that you're like, man, I hate
I'm
installing
not
hardware
doing
on
that.
cabinets. Yeah. I'm going to hire people that know how to put good hardware on cabinets. And that's what they love doing for whatever reason. Cool. More power to them. I'm going to hire them, pay them good money, and they're going to do it.
Yep. Yeah. And there's another piece I'll offer too. You get a free one. Be willing to fire your customer. And in fact, do it often. Like look at your 20% worst paying, hardest to accommodate, most needy, most demanding. You get rid of that 20% and all of a sudden you can grow your business by 50%.
Yeah.
And I think that's, for smaller businesses, that's hard to do. Because you're like, you get into that fear that you're going to go backwards, but you won't.
Yeah.
It'll propel you forward.
I love that advice. I think that there's something in the universe of firing somebody that either was a bad decision to start or it's just turned into a bad situation. There's so much power there that something always comes around.
And you'll respect yourself more.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, as a business, you'll take yourself more seriously.
Yeah.
I
love
think
that.
So.
That's great advice. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much, man. This has been really fun. You're on social media. You got a website. Where can people find you? Where do you want them to follow you if they want to learn more about you?
Facebook. You definitely can follow us on Peppermint Cabinets St. George, or it's STG. Long story why I don't have Peppermint Cabinets on Instagram, but that's what it is. Peppermint Cabinets STG. And then I have a personal account on Facebook or Peppermint Cabinets.
Awesome. So follow them on Facebook, guys. They're doing some really cool stuff, and the reels that they put out are pretty cool too. So
yeah, and DM me if anybody has any questions. I'm an open book. So all your followers can definitely reach out anytime.
I love that. Thank you so much, man. And thank you if you're watching. If you made it to the end, we appreciate you sticking with us. Hopefully by watching today, you learned how to wing it just a little bit less, because, man, those finances, I'll tell you what, they'll get you, man. And like Jeremy said, like once you're doing about $1 million, you need somebody that is watching those financials for you. Even if it's just a bookkeeper to start, like get somebody that is a second opinion, that cares, that can watch those things and can be on top of them, because
it can challenge your perspective.
Challenges you. Yeah. Get it out of your own head.
Yep.
So hopefully you feel like you're winging it just a little bit less. we'll see you next week, and we'll be here with a different business owner who will help you feel like you're winging it a little less with something else. So till then, we'll talk to you later.